All right, welcome back to Online with an Architect. My name's Josh Odgers. I'll be your host today. Very happy to have a good friend of mine and former colleague with us today, Samir Roshan. Welcome, Samir.
Hey, thanks, Josh. It's a pleasure to be on this show. It's been doing a lot of interesting stuff with your podcast. So it's really my pleasure to be on this show.
Fantastic. Well, it's our pleasure to have you. So for those of you who don't know, Samir and I are both VCDXs and both NPXs, and we've done a lot of work together in the HCI space in the
Indeed.
past, which has been fantastic. And so now you're with Broadcom. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. It's been 2 years in my new role post Nutanix. As you know, we've worked together for a number of years. And when I joined in February of 2021, I joined the cloud team of VMware as a director for solution architecture in APJ. And my primary responsibility was to build a team of architects who are going deep enough with customers and doing the cloud conversations and making sure that their architecture decisions, they are using VMware Cloud as one of the foundations for their workloads. Fast forward, as we all have heard the news of Broadcom acquisition. So interesting, when I just joined, I think 2 or 3 weeks just in the new role in 21, Broadcom announced a decision to acquire VMware. So it's been a fantastic ride in the last 2 years of building a team, despite all of the noise around the acquisition. But it's been a very deep and steep learning curve for us. And despite all of that, we have managed to do record business for the cloud team in APJ. And that has been something that I'm really proud of the team and also really like to, thank you our customers to kind of support us in this time frame. With respect to the new role, I'm going to be part of a team of, think of them as principal architects, think of them as executive architects, and our focus is going to be honed into the top accounts that we have prioritized as a leadership team in APJ. And as my work in Nutanix and prior to one, the focus on enterprises is where we are basically going to help them to achieve the next milestone in their own journey. And our team is going to be focused on a handful of select accounts. It's not going to be that we are going to be working on, let's say, hundreds of accounts. Are going to be focused on a handful of accounts, and we want to go deeper with respect to our technical engagements. We want to go deeper with respect to the engagement that the customers had with us, with respect to R&D, with respect to any kind of technical outcomes they want, right? So it's a very interesting role. I'm really excited about what the future holds us in this particular team. And the most important thing is that it's a very impactful position to be in for our customers and as well as to Broadcom business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the customers are very lucky to have a team with someone like yourself involved because, your experience and skill set is very valuable. So, yeah, for sure, I like the model that they've come up with.
Yep.
So maybe tell us a bit about your background. I mentioned you're a VCDX. Do you want to tell us a bit about your VCDX journey?
Yeah, VCDX journey, I think everybody thinks that VCDX is a number to start with, but as we all know, VCDX is in the world. It's not just a number. It's not just a designation. It's blood, sweat, tears. Not only yourself, but your family, your wife, your kids. So it's a lot of commitment, and I think our journeys have been similar. My journey started when I was in VMware. So I joined VMware back in 2004. In the support team, and then in 2007 I moved to the VMware R&D team, and that's where the VCDX entire thing started. And I used to be a very active contributor in VMware communities, and I would to contribute and interact with a lot of technologists out there. And I was just hearing a common theme that everybody was very excited about at that time, that VMware has launched the next level of certification. Which was the VCDX at that point of time, but there were different exams like VCDS Enterprise Administration exams and things like that. And I was very much updated with respect to the VMware certification all the certifications that was available at that point of time, but there was always a notion of what next for me. And being in R&D, the way, because I had a customer background in support, being in R&D, you were not exposed to customers directly. So one of my fixes to that problem was to go into VMware communities and contribute to the questions that they were asking, and also it was a feedback loop and mechanism for me to better the product as an R&D lead at that point of time. But the interest was so much that I chose to pursue VCDX, and because of that, I made a career shift. Because you cannot just do VCDX out of being in R&D. You need to have architectural experience. You need to go and speak with customers to understand what their business challenges are, what their technical challenges are, how you convert and work under constraints, how do you take look at risk that they have in your environment and design architectural decisions, right? I couldn't have done that without having a front-end customer experience where I was an architect, I was an implementation engineer. So a whole A to Z journey of the customer experience was something that was missing. So yeah, one of the biggest risks that I took at that point of time is leaving an amazing role in VMware R&D as a tech lead for ESXi patch team under CPD, and pursue a career in IBM consulting, because at that time VMware did not have its consulting team in India. So I didn't even, I wanted to try to work into the consulting. There was no team there at that time. We started building the team very later on. And I was fortunate that IBM gave me an opportunity to join in their architecture practice team. I joined their IBM Software Labs division, which was the top-notch architecture team, and I was in charge of working in the x86 virtualization practice team. And that gave me a lot of exposure around working with larger customers, because these accounts were massive accounts. They were 200 million plus TAM, 500 million plus TAM for IBM, because it was large strategic accounts. And one of the components, as you know, VMware has been in business for 25 plus years. VMware became kind of a platform for enterprises to run their applications on. So a major part of these customers of IBM were using VMware products, and that gave me a very good exposure of kind of understanding the customer landscape, understanding the architecture nuances, and also interviewing a lot of those customers' architects to better their architecture, right? So this experience of around 2 years was really good, and then I got a call from VMware hiring team that they're building the VMware consulting practice in India. So I was like, man, it's time to go back, right? So that was in 2011. Around 2009, 2011 is where I, went back to VMware, and I joined in the consulting practice team. And rest is history. It's like there was we were actually doing a lot of cutting edge stuff at that point of time, because it's a small team, and the amount of exposure that we had at that point of time, because you have to obviously there was a very big support that we had from the consulting practice team itself with respect to reference architectures, with respect to templates and all of that. But there was a lot of times where you have to go and build these things from scratch for customers, right? And this is what the core of VCDX is, right? You are not relying on a set practice or a set rule. You're always challenging and questioning based on the circumstances that has been given around the business case and the technical use case. So 2 years was a consulting role that I did, and then while all of this was happening, I cleared my the VCAP exams multiple times. And I was kind of the mindset was that I need to pick a project which was large enough, which was able to satisfy all of the blueprint criteria that VCDX has. And then if there are certain aspect that was missing, then I would basically look at adding those stuffs to make sure that the design basically adheres to the VCDX blueprint. So it was an interesting journey, because not every customer has all of the technology that basically makes a blueprint, and you basically can go and do your exams and defend yourself and all of that, right? So it's that journey that you have to go through. Even if you have done a large project, you have to still add those missing elements of what needs to be the benchmark for the blueprint itself. So that was an interesting journey. But then there was an opportunity that came up to kind of build the technical account management practice in India, and I joined the TAM team as the first TAM. And there was a different level of experience again, because I already did the consulting in IBM and in VMware. But with the TAM role, what it also teaches you is how do you do a lot of soft skills around customer management. How do you basically portray your design decisions backed by data, backed by insights, understanding and doing a lot of health checks. One of the things that it helps me in the exam on VCDX was we back in the days, if you remember, Josh, we used to have 3 sections in VCDX. You had to have troubleshooting section, and nowadays obviously we don't have the troubleshooting section. But when you, as a TAM, doing infrastructure analysis and health checks and all of that, you are almost 80% ready for the troubleshooting section, because you have already seen a lot of problems, right? So it's kind of, if you look at very organically, even though there were conscious decisions that I took, just kind of even changing a job just for VCDX, but there was a lot of these conscious decisions and the experiences that I started getting that have kind of helped me in this journey. And it's been 10 years. My VCDX was 10 years ago. But I still remember all these things as just like it's the first day, and that's the beauty of attaining an exam like VCDX, where you are very proud of the journey that you have taken. The destination is very sweet as well, but again, the message to everyone who is pursuing this, we always talk about it's the journey, not the destination. But in this case, obviously, both are important. But even if you have taken the journey, if you have not been able to do your VCDX in the first attempt, it is something that always gives you goosebumps. It is something that you always will cherish whole of your life, right? So that's where kind of I was the first TAM worldwide in being in the TAM role in VMware to do VCDX. Although I had the consulting background, but that was something amazingly satisfying. The first Indian to do VCDX, being in India, I think that was another one which is still top of my mind. That's something that I've achieved. And then obviously the design part came in, prepared the exam. Obviously, you had to do all the exams and everything else. Submitted my documentation, and I came to Singapore for my VCDX defense. The 3 gentlemen who were on my panel, and obviously 3 sections, very nervous while going into the defense itself. But based on these conscious decisions, based on the experiences that I've built in different various roles, that kind of helped me get this in the first attempt itself. So again, it's like when you are designing your career, you are also designing your career to a certain outcome. So I was like, things are falling in place. And 10 years back in Singapore, I did my defense, and I think a month or 2, or maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, our good friend Mark Brunstad, I get an email from him. I remember the morning in Bengaluru at that day. I got an email, and I was like very hesitant in checking. It's like, what's the obvious? The fail rate in VCDX is enormously high, right? And the first word was congratulations. My God! And that time, it was an out of world experience for me. So, and that's kind of my again the journey that I am, and in last 10 years in Singapore, kind of also you can attribute to VCDX, because when I came here for my defense, interacted with a lot of VMware people, I thought it's a good place and my next destination as an individual in my career to expand into an APJ landscape. And I think Singapore was the best place to, again, like how things basically interject with each other, one decision affecting the other decisions. So this is just a story of that.
Yeah,
it's a long one, but
your career actually is what I take away from that. You really you went through the different roles, and had you not made those career choices and changes in roles, you may not have achieved VCDX, because you wouldn't have had that broad experience that's required to achieve it. So I think that's a great tip to anyone looking at VCDX or becoming a great architect, is you got to be in the right role to learn those skills. And the thing that I think, like you mentioned, is unique about yourself is you went into the TAM role. And I think the TAM is an extremely valuable role and something that the customers really need. And because you had that experience, which I would argue is sort of broadly speaking enterprise architecture as opposed to solution architecture, you're experiencing that side of the architecture piece, and you're also doing solution architecture at the same time in your consulting practice history. So I think it's important to do both. Otherwise, like you say, the troubleshooting section of VCDX or the design section, might have been something you couldn't pass. But with your broad experience, you're able to do that, especially on the first try, is a great result.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 100% agree with you. And again, I don't want to kind of bromance here, but same as yours, right? I mean, your career has been remarkable, in terms of the choices that you have made. I think that this is what I mean, we need to, if we look at guidance for other people or the other enterprise architects which are coming at this point of time, you need to be very holistic in your thought process. And it's a long-term process, right? It is something that you have to invest your time. You have to be very switched on with respect to the career choices that you want to make and where you want to go as an individual. And when you look at it, going and talking to larger customers like CTO levels, CIO levels, if you don't have a well-rounded experience, or if you don't intend to do that experience, then what happens is your conversations with them doesn't really, create any kind of value for them, right? And I think that's very important because when you look at the modern world CTOs and CIOs, they are themselves programmers. We look at startup culture coming in. You look at the smaller and medium enterprises that has been there for the last 5-10 years. A lot of these roles are very technical in nature. But of all and they're not losing their strategic relevance. They're very strategic, but they're also very technical in nature. So as an executive architect or as an enterprise architect, you need to be having done those things in the past and also having a vision. How are you going to shape their company and their company direction with your technology? I think that comes with experience, and that is something that my kind of guidance will be for everyone who is trying to pursue VCDX. And again, VCDX is just a destination. Your story starts from there, right? VCDX gives you a seat at the table because it's a remarkable certification, but that's just the start of your journey as a true enterprise architect. And from there, you need to take it to the next level where you are the real advisor to the C level, but also not losing your relevance to an architect within the customer. You have to be audible, ready to have any sort of these conversations as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the value of VCDX is it tests you at the enterprise level and the solution architecture level, but also at the troubleshooting level. So
Absolutely.
You can have a executive level conversation, an architect or a management level conversation, as well as an implementation or an engineer conversation. So I think that's why that certification I found so valuable, and certainly why our customers find us so valuable is because we can do that for them. So, and the fact you went through R&D as well, I was at R&D at Nutanix as well. These type of roles really help set you up for that position as well. And certainly customer feedback and understanding their business requirements helps us develop products and solutions better. So very important to have that experience.
Yeah, and the world has changed, right? It is a subscription and a SaaS world. So essentially, if you look at, there's a term that we use in VMware, customer 360. It's a focus that we need to have from all round. And as we pivot towards subscription, products are becoming more and more SaaS oriented. If you look at, you need to also develop as an architect because your skills are no more required to implement software in major part the way people are consuming software nowadays. So how do you basically shift and make the change, considering that most of the software that people are going to consume, like take VMC on AWS, for example, it's a subscription-based mechanism that VMware has launched, where customers don't have to bother about any kind of architectural decisions at the infrastructure layer. We take care of all of that, right? So how do you then go and talk to a customer around those kind of decisions? Because a majority of the decisions that they had to take is already being eliminated because it's a service that is being stood up by the principal vendor itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key. The architectural role evolves over time. So, if it's VMC on AWS, my role is guiding them to make sure VMC on AWS is viable and meets their requirements.
Mhm.
And then it's, what other solutions are complementary to that solution and strategically what it can achieve for them. It's less so about the technical layer and more so at the business layer with these hyperscaler solutions. So, absolutely. VCDX set us both up well there.
Yep.
Very cool. We touched on VMC and AWS. Do you want to give us a quick rundown on, for those who may not know what that is? I'd be surprised if our listeners didn't know, but maybe a quick intro on VMC and AWS, and then
Absolutely.
we'll dive into it.
Sure. As I said, VMC and AWS, if you look at the service, I mean, let's look at the genesis of the service and then we go into a bit of details around the architecture. The service is around 7, 8 years old, and when the conceptualization of this service was done by Pat Gelsinger and Andy Jassy when they were both at the helms of CEO of VMware and AWS. And one of the principal reasons that why this is done is obviously if you look at the 25 plus years of history of VMware, virtualization leader, private cloud leader, AWS become public cloud leader with respect to the services that they were offering. But the fundamental principle that you look at is the enterprises, and one of the main challenges that the enterprises customers of AWS was facing was how quickly they can get the customers to get migrated, their workloads get migrated to public cloud. Right. So when both organizations joined hands, that was a premise of making sure that our joint customers are able to realize the value of cloud as much faster as they can without compromising on any of the important factors around availability, security, performance, and also making sure that the service is consumable in terms of the financials that they are looking at, right? So because of this genesis and the use case that we saw, the service is a jointly engineered service. If you look at their primary, in terms of the components that you look at, there are few building block that we have. The core service itself consists of vSphere, which is the hypervisor where most of the workloads in the world run. vSAN becomes core part of providing that storage layer for running your workloads. We'll touch base on what are the enhancements that we have done in the service over the years. And then NSX is the glue that holds the service together, right? So these are three primary infrastructure components that we are aware of in the private cloud world. This is same components are going to be part of the VMware VMC and AWS service. So this basically provides you the layer where you can run your virtual machines, you can run your containers, and all of that. Now, the management part is again with you can do it with vCenter, you can do with the cloud management products that VMware has, as well as we provide a separate cloud console. From there, a lot of basic services can be managed as well. But that's a core premise in terms of the architectural level itself. On top of that, what happens is obviously this service is I will show you the regions where this is available. This service runs in AWS data center itself, right? We support two hardware types, i3en.metal and i4i.metal. Depending on your use case, you go and select. Generally, people who have more storage heavy applications, they will prefer i3en metal, provides more storage. People who are looking at a balanced workload and more performance, i4i.metal is the choice. And the i4i metal is where we have announced it earlier this year. And this is where most of our customers are moving towards. It provides them better value for money as well as more performing and the latest hardware. Right. So in terms of the hardware platforms, there are two hardware platforms available. So there is an optionality for customers to, depending on their workload and the application choices, they can pick either of the hardware types which is going to be available. But then you have another architecture where you can build applications where the storage is not attached locally. You can leverage storage either with VMware itself or with NetApp in the cloud, right? So on top of that, what we have also done is you can also run Kubernetes workload with VMware Tanzu on VMC, right? So that is part of integrated in the platform itself. So you don't need to find different homes for your virtual machine workloads and your container workloads. If you decide to do and bring one common framework of, let's say, Tanzu running on-prem, Tanzu running on the cloud, as well as on Tanzu natively running on AWS, you can actually have that seamless with VMC, right? So you have more optionality with respect to running your workloads either into traditional virtual machine architectures or into microservices with Kubernetes. So that's an amazing feature. On top of that, we also provide other value-added services, and one of the fastest moving workloads that we have at this point of time is VMware ransomware recovery. And if you look at the amount of events, global events that we are hearing and seeing on a daily basis around, companies being hijacked for ransomware, their businesses are, there is a lot of challenge around perception for those businesses going forward. People are losing data, so there's all sorts of challenges around a new type of threat that the organizations are facing. So with VMware Cloud ransomware and disaster recovery, so I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the old way we were trying to do the SRM stuff. We used to have protection and disaster recovery, and the VMware Cloud ransomware and disaster recovery takes that service and makes it even much more better, right? So you can still do SRM if you want to do, but with ransomware recovery, it's an added service that the customers can buy as an add-on and work with VMC by default as well, right? So that is something that I see as a very, very amazing use case at this point of time. And after the core VMC service itself, this is the fastest selling and fastest consumed service that we see globally for VMC. Right. Now, what we do also, one thing is that when you move your workloads, how are you going to do the moving of the workload? So we have tools around a complete package of tooling around migration with HCX. Right, HCX is a very mature migration tool which allows customers to migrate their data from their on-prem to VMC on AWS the fastest way. And this is where we see the majority of the customers, and we'll touch base on some of the use cases. But this is where you are able to kind of move your data center workloads in the cloud without any kind of downtime. You can plan your maintenance activities, and you can move workloads much more faster than kind of recoding themselves or any kind of re-architecture of those workloads, right? So that's an overall genesis on where it started, the service 7 years ago, and since then this is the only jointly engineered hyperscaler solution out there, which is where we have a parallel organization on R&D on both the sides, AWS and VMware. And in the field also, we had the parallel organization for VMware, VMC and AWS sellers and SAs, and similar structure existed in AWS as well, right? So there was a lot of synchronization and a lot of parity with respect to what the both organizations have been trying to do for the last 7 years, and we see those results with respect to some of the largest logos that we see in APJ as well as global, right? Other key point is because the programs are so integrated, customers who have AWS credits, they can use their AWS credits and avail for the VMC on AWS service itself, right? So they don't need to, and it's kind of an advantage, right? Because AWS customers who have been given those credits, they can take those credits and utilize against VMC and AWS. Because a lot of time what we are seeing is customers, when they do the commit initially, they kind of lag behind in terms of the commits that they have given to AWS. And as you know, the AWS discounting policies are a lot is taken into account in terms of what the customer commit over a period of time is, right? So it's a good model where existing VMware customers and AWS customers, they can utilize their existing credits against this service and get benefit from AWS as well. And both the organizations, we are also providing customers benefits around migration. AWS has it's called a migration map plan, which is one of their famous migration plans where depending on the deal size and the complexity, the customer get a set of credits around professional services. In VMware also, we started doing a similar offering as well around migration, right? So we are not only assisting customers with respect to a technology, but we are also making sure that there is enough funding available for our customers around migration and hand holding them through that particular process. They can choose to use any of the partners of their choice, the MAP program, as well as VMware, the VMware migration plan is very partner friendly. So the customers can choose any partner that they are working with, and then we can work with the partner and the customer and help them kind of realize the overall value of VMC or the VMware cloud as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you touched on earlier is you can run Kubernetes, you can run your virtual machines, you can get into the cloud very quickly. So to me, it's that time to value that's very important. And also, you're creating a standard platform where you can run all workloads. And this is something I think is very valuable. So you can basically get everything up into AWS quickly and easily, and you don't need to migrate it into a native instance. You can actually leave it there and actually get a lot of value out of it, running it on top of vSphere, like you said.
Yep.
So actually, this first slide we've got on the screen here, I think it's a great one. It's highlighting it's jointly engineered, and it also touches on the fact that you've got the native services right beside VMC on AWS, and even like NetApp, Azure, not Azure, sorry, FSX for NetApp ONTAP.
Correct.
It is fantastic that you can, if you're a NetApp customer, you can obviously leverage that to replicate your data from on-prem into AWS. And I think this is just another example of you're taking the 80% of the architecture that you and I used to do in our previous roles, and it's done for you. So now we're not really architecting the layer one, we're doing all the stuff on top. So I think that's a great example of value from these jointly engineered solutions.
Yeah, and one of the things that we have to admit, right, it's like the applications are no more a single tier applications. The applications have become multiple tiers, and the way the new services are coming up, there is going to be a plenty. Like one application can consist of hundreds of services or 50 services, and this particular model allows customers to choose based on few factors. Right, cost is one of the major factors in there. But having access to AWS native services or any cloud native services, I'm talking, let's say, their database services or any serverless components around Lambda or any other things, right? Those services are very hard to build on a private cloud environment. So for those services, you have to rely on hyperscalers of the world. And having the proximity of your main workload and in the cloud, you can always build an architecture where your data and your virtual machines are able to push the data either through a database or through any other service. And that data can be then taken into the cloud, and you can do your LLMs, you can do your AI ML modeling on top of that, or you can build any new service which is a no code service or Lambda on top of that using the data that is there in the virtual machine, right? So a true hybrid cloud architecture is where you're not compromising on your speed of moving your workload in the cloud, but you're also not compromising on the innovation on some of the new services that the cloud offers. So I think that's a very critical thing, that this is the VMware Cloud is the only service in that case where we are speeding up people migration to the cloud and also making sure that they are doing it in a safe, efficient, and fast way without compromising on performance. And one more major thing is that also you're not changing anything in terms of operating model, your supportability model, your skills, they all remain the same. You don't need to go and bring a set of another engineers who is specialized hardcore on the AWS cloud to operate your majority of enterprise applications, right? So that's a major thing. Now, once the workload is there, your team is exposed to both the technologies. Nowadays, every customer has both the hyperscaler, architectural assets in terms of people, in terms of processes, but also all the virtualization, the people like us who have done massive investment in their career on a VMware technology, they are able to leverage and build their skills and match them with the AWS skills that they have, either from their colleagues or just by practically experimenting with the product. So I think that's a very major thing that every customer that they should look at. Is it is helping resolving and better utilizing their current talent that they have without throwing them deep into something that they have to learn in, let's say, a 2 months or 3 months time frame, because you need to build expertise over a period of time instead of just doing things on the fly. And especially these things are, when we go and talk to banking customers here, they talk about enterprise grade is one thing, but I need regulatory grade. Now, when you talk about regulatory grade, you need to look at all of those aspects, right? You need to look at how supporting your internal customers, how are you creating security policies around it. So one of the greatest advantages of us being able to offer this on all the hyperscalers is that they don't need to change any of that, right? And it's years and years of architectural best practices, the tooling that you have done, your automation that you have done. Nothing needs to be changed. You have the same endpoints, you have the same APIs that you can converse in the VMware Cloud on the hyperscaler solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's a huge skills gap in the market. So if we introduce new technology that requires people to upskill, that skills gap's going to get worse and worse. So this is a great example of people can leverage what they know and still get all those benefits on the hyperscaler. So yeah, huge fan. I've done a few episodes on this topic for the various hyperscalers, and every one I always like it. So it's a great topic. And in fact,
Yeah.
one of the things I think is a great innovation is, as you touched on earlier, is some of the new capabilities around vSAN that
Absolutely.
VMC on AWS is supporting. Do you want to run us through that very quickly?
Sure. I think we have covered the use cases, but I mean, just for the audience, I think we all are. Most of the customers and people have been are kind of looking into these four areas, but I'm trying to introduce another fifth one, which is not there on this one. So obviously, application migration and modernization is one of the key aspects of why customers are looking at VMware Cloud holistically, not only VMC, but all the other hyperscalers cloud. Now, when I mention VMware Cloud, I'm addressing all the VMware Cloud capabilities on all the hyperscalers, right? Because that's how our charter is, right? We're not just concentrating on VMC and AWS. The team and us, we are focusing on the overall VMware Cloud vision for the customers. So application migration modernization remains the key priority for us, because it's, at the end of the day, it's all about applications. We need to make sure that the customers application that they're using, they're running their businesses on, is basically, again, the same level of SLAs that they had on their private cloud is maintained and enhanced on VMware Cloud. So that remains the same. The other one is data center extension. It's a very simple use case, but quite often what we're seeing, and one of the examples that I'll give you, and a lot of companies in the last 2 years are going through a phase of looking at their spend, right? And if you look at there is a proliferation of the smaller sites, medium sites, and core data centers across the world for many large customers. Think about the world's top 3 banks. They have multiple sites running across the world. Now, a lot of people are looking at that investment and thinking about, does it make sense for me to run, let's say, a 4 server in a room in a remote place in the world? Right, so a lot of those architectural decisions are being taken now to how to manage best. And one of the things that we look at, in kind of addressing those use cases, is because VMC and AWS presence is there across the world. So or the overall VMware Cloud. I mean, if you look at the VMware Cloud on Oracle, it's there available in every region Oracle is available, right? So this is where we are kind of helping customers to take those strategic decisions that they have taken, but they still have to support those customers, they still have to support that geography. So we help the customers to migrate some of those workloads in our investment in our VMware Cloud on those regions, and then take some of those hardcore, the cache that was basically is there on the books of the customers, right? So data center extension is one of those technologies, but data center extension is also tightly coupled with a major DC or major data center expansion that the customers is trying to do, right? So this is a very, again, I don't need to go too much detail in that, but essentially you want to build on-demand capacity, you want to look at infrastructure expansion for maybe a year or two, and then you see how that goes. Again, VMware Cloud is the best choice for that.
Even just
Then
projects as well. Standing up something for a project, running it up
correct.
for 3 or 6 months, and then running it down after that. I think data center
Absolutely.
extension is quite underrated. Actually, I think it's
Yeah.
something people should really look to more.
Yeah, and a lot of things are one of the things that we are seeing is a lot of people are divesting. The major companies are not in the business of building data centers, right? They are trying to run their business. So there is a lot of divesting that is coming in that investment as well, right? So again, VMware Cloud or across the hyperscalers is a good use case for that as well. Which is where the DC migration comes in, where you are basically taking your entire workload and you're migrating either from your existing data center provider or from your existing offices where you have leased data center space to a new space, right? This also gives an opportunity for customers to look at infrastructure refresh. And this is one of the key points. VMware Cloud, especially in VMC, we offer a very unique method where customers do not have to worry about hardware refreshes. So there used to be, I think we need to go and check again if that model is going to be available and carry forward in the future or not. Just making sure that it is talked about. But there was an opportunity, and we used to have a model where a customer can buy a flexi license from us, and that basically allows them to like we talk about hardware refresh. Let's say i3, if they have a flexi license, they don't have to worry about moving from, let's say, i3, which was end of sale for us, to an i3 and an i4i. We will take care of that. We will, in our backend, our SRE team, because VMC is a managed service, we will take care of the migration of the workloads. We'll do all of the cluster conversion, and you get a new hardware because you chose to buy a flexi subscription license earlier, right? So one of those things are very, very important, because a lot of time data center refresh projects, as you're aware, can take years for customers to do. It's not an easy thing to go and do. It's not like you just go and buy a new hardware and automatically everything transforms. You need to put a complete project plan. You need to hire a team of architects and implementation experts, and you need to look at your resiliency, risk management, and all sorts of things, right? And this basically delays why we see a lot of people are not able to exit their data centers even though they want to, and if it's the right thing to do for their business, is because of all of this complexity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
So
almost like
yeah.
HCI. HCI
Hmm.
simplified traditional data centers, so that time to value is a benefit. And I see, the VMware Cloud as the extension of HCI. It's now the easy way to deploy in the cloud. It's much faster. It's much easier. It's got
Yeah,
all these models. So that's kind of the evolution I see.
exactly. And this also gives the customer, I mean, you are now a enterprise partner, so it gives our customers, let's just say our customers, an opportunity to relook at. We always look at finding efficiencies in the operating model of the customers, right? So the ARIA suite of product, like for example ARIA operations, is very familiar to do that. And this is an approach where when you look at migration, we suggest those optimization opportunities for the customer, and they can right size their data centers as an approach as well. So it's a very, very, very cost saving exercise that the customers can kind of do by leveraging this technology. And we touched based on disaster recovery and ransomware already, but again, this is the workload that we are seeing where it's the number one use case that we are seeing at this point of time, and we are very, very happy to work with those customers to protect their workloads. And I think I've written a LinkedIn article about it. There's a ton of material available. Please reference that. I think I would say that we are not marketing it enough. as an individual, not as a VMware employee, but as an individual, I think we're not, making more noise around this offering because it's an amazing offering. Nobody else has it in the industry at this point of time. So I'll urge your listeners to go and look at some of the collaterals that we have on our websites. And this service integrates with VMC and AWS really well. Again, you don't need to kind of don't worry about any infrastructure. It is all done by us. It's a managed service again, right? So anything that we're talking about in the context of VMC and AWS, it's a managed service being offered to you as a customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to echo your sentiment here, some people might look at this slide and say, oh, this is marketing, this is, sort of marketecture maybe. I'm literally working on a project with a customer who's ticking every single one of these boxes. So they've got some native workload, they're modernizing, right? They're trying to, in the interim, extend their data center to cater for new workloads. They're also looking to get out of their data centers ultimately due to the hardware refresh complexity that you mentioned. Their hardware is coming end of life. Rather than refresh hardware, let's move into a VMware Cloud hyperscaler, and also to establish a comprehensive DR strategy and ransomware recovery. So literally working on a project which ticks all these boxes right now, and very much looking forward to doing a detailed case study on that, obviously if the customer permits it, because I think more people need to know the value of this solution and how it can be done, and how partners like End2End can help deliver those for them.
Yeah. And the other thing is, apart from all the technical benefits, if it doesn't make sense financially for a customer, they're not going to buy it, right? Because everything needs to make sense in terms of the value realized from any of the investment that they're making. And so when we go and approach a project, we do entire cloud economics of that particular project and our approach during the pre-sale cycle itself. So that's a very unique thing that, again, through partners like you or through directly working with customers, we go through a full, experience around financial modeling, technical architecture, and then what the day one and day two will look like for them, right? So it's a 3-part journey that we take with the customers. And internally in VMware, we have built a very large team of SREs, the site reliability engineers, you may want to call it. It's a Google terminology. They introduced this in the world. And then also we have CREs, which are customer relationship or customer reliability engineers. So there is a whole sort of R&D talent that we have built across this particular platform that guarantees that when you're designing it properly, you have the SLAs that we have adhered to you while working with you are met. Right, so that's really, really key, right? That there is a financial modeling done, and which is all the technical use cases are backed by financial modeling. Will be my summary on that one. All right, so those are the 4. The 5th one, which is a very interesting one.
Oh, can I interrupt you there for a second though? I just wanted to touch on one thing on the cost model piece, because it's as you said, it's very important. So this customer I'm working with now, which I won't name them, but the return on investment for them. The hyperscaler solution that they've chosen and the indicative sizing we've come up with is going to be entirely paid for in purely exiting their data center. So the costs of just keeping the lights on and having those racks in the data center is actually going to pay for the entire hyperscaler solution. So that's just an example of how much value you can get out of one of these solutions, because they currently don't have DR to the level they want. So if they were to do DR to the level that they can in a hyperscaler, they would have to have all these nodes on standby. They might get some vSAN ready nodes, and they might have 100 of those standing by or whatever. But in the hyperscaler, they don't need to have all that hardware sitting there standby. The hyperscaler's got it. Obviously, they're going to have some, but obviously when you use the vCloud ransomware recovery, VMware Cloud ransomware recovery, then they don't even need that either. So it's just a fantastic total cost of ownership, return on investment, and hence I'll definitely do a case study on it, even if it's anonymized. But just the cost of hardware maintenance, third-party warranties on old hardware, keeping the lights on in a data center can actually pay for a brand new solution, which delivers a lot more capability and performance and resiliency. So definitely worth looking at for those who think it might be cost prohibitive, you may well be very surprised that it's not.
Yeah, I think very well said. And we have done a lot of studies with external, vendors and with customers, and we have tons of data around that published already.
Mm.
But look at the beauty of this, that the situation that you talked about, and your fees are also paid by just doing this, right? You're not, the customer is not going to pay you extra because your consulting fees are part of their effort that they would have undertaken anyway,
Mm.
right? And they're getting the best set of architects working on them, making sure that everything is well taken care of,
Mm.
the services enhanced even further, while they don't have to worry about the center anymore. So it's a beautiful story out there, right?
Yeah, and the
So
consulting can
amazing.
even be
Yeah,
subsidized by the hyperscalers in some cases. So some of that effort
absolutely.
is subsidized. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something worth digging into to all the CIOs out there listening about thinking the cloud's expensive. Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but we'll definitely we'll make sure you know the truth about your environment.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the fifth one. It is something that I have been personally working on for the last 9 months, and this came about by a lot of curiosity by our joint customers with hyperscalers. And again, this is something that we try to answer the questions of the customers who were asking that I have moved or created workloads running on, let's take a EC2 instance running on the cloud. And this is a workload that is, I am not going to use any cloud native services. It is just going to be as a virtual machine, which means there is not going to be chopping, changing, on a regular basis. There is not going to be that service. It's just going to be in that particular virtual machine or EC2 instance. And at max, it's going to be another 3 or 4 instances it is going to be talking to. And there is a predictable in terms of performance that I'm seeing on a consistent basis. Would you guys like to do a cost benefit analysis and tell me, if I move those workloads to VMC, what that will be and how are you going to do that, and the overall arcing benefit for them? So
How
we
did
have
I
been
know you
trying
were
to.
going down this route? I knew you would go down this route, and I completely agree with you, by the way. This is something
Yeah.
I also believe in, and I think it's, for a lot of customers, there's a lot of great reasons to use native instances. There's a ton of great reasons.
Correct.
But in a lot of cases, it's also commercially very attractive to bring them back onto one of the VMware Cloud Solutions, and not just from a cost perspective. Actually, I've seen instances, in fact, many times, where you have to oversize an instance to get either capacity or performance, and therefore
Correct.
you're paying more. And Steve Kaplan, one of our former colleagues, he coined the phrase cloud waste. And I quite
Yes.
like it, because it is. You're wasting resources or money to get one criteria in those T-shirt sizes. So bringing those workloads onto a platform where you can overcommit resources, you can thin provision the disks, you can benefit from compression and deduplication and all these things,
Yep.
can be a huge commercial value. And also the performance, you're benefiting from that local storage, and it can actually increase your performance over a native instance. Yeah. So it's a great commercial outcome in a lot of cases, but also a great technical outcome.
Yeah, and the last bit is also, in certain cases it increases the availability of the service, because when you look at the VMware Cloud, you're essentially having all the goodness of ESXi, you have the NSX component in there, you have the management components in there. So it's a well integrated service layer. If you have to establish a similar outcome from a service and SLA perspective on a hyperscaler world, you have to consume a much more different layers of services. So how you're basically architecting that. So the discussions with our customers have not only started just from a cost perspective, although that is one of the major factors. Few of the customers have reached out to us to look at how do I increase the availability, and we did that exercise with them. And in fact, technically, in order to support this, if you look at earlier in the year, VMware Converter, our trusty tool that we used to use 20 years ago, is back and alive. And VMware Converter now supports EC2 to VMware VMC on AWS migration. So again, the customers do not have to pay anything for this kind of migration. There would be some consulting costs involved, but that can be taken care by, let's say, some of the map funding available. And by the way, this is something that not we are not trying to do in isolation. We very much work with our hyperscaler teams and AWS teams in particular on this. And some of the analysis that we have seen, because one of the aims that AWS always have is that they want to reduce the customer spend. Right, and this is a very, very clever way for them to also kind of go back to some of the customers and reduce their spend by just moving them some of the EC2 instances on VMC and AWS. Right, so this is a kind of an evolving fifth use case. We debate around what should we call it. We look at rebalance, we talk about remix, but we are between rebalance and remix as a use case name for this, which is very close to my heart. But I think it's a real value for customers who are using EC2 instances and they want to explore, those workloads, because they're not leaving hyperscalers. They are still in those hyperscaler boundaries, but they are more effectively utilizing all the tooling that they have, all the tooling and resources that they have. So that's the fifth one that we are seeing. We have been building collaterals internally, working with our AWS teams to develop some cloud economics. And when we did the cloud economics with some of our customers on this particular use case, we are seeing anywhere between 30 to 35% straight away changes with respect to advantage, the cost benefit that the customers are getting. So it's a huge number. And in my experience, working with a lot of customers, a customer will start paying attention to you when the cost benefit analysis is anywhere beyond 25%. So if you go into a customer and try to sell a new solution, and trying to uproot an established vendor, and if your cost benefit, first of all, technically it has to be a great product, it has to make sense, but if your cost benefit analysis is not giving them more than 25% of benefit, they won't consider it.
Exactly, because
Right.
there's too many associated costs with it.
Absolutely.
But I agree that 25% number is kind of that magic number. And also in the analysis that I've done, going from native into something like VMware Cloud, yeah, I see 20, 30, 40% improvements in a lot of cases. So it's not uncommon at all to see very, very high return on investment for that. And also that gives you, again, back to that standard platform for all your workloads. The more you can put onto that standard platform, you get economies of scale as well. Because obviously, in your SDDC, you've got vSAN, you've got your data store, you've got CPU and RAM available. The more you can utilize that, the better. We've got these amazing features we've been using for so many years. They work in the cloud now, and have been for many years. So I think that's a really great way for customers to optimize. I would just call that service optimized, to be honest, because you can optimize both ways as well. If something makes sense to modernize, let's do that. If it makes sense to bring it back onto vSphere, let's do that. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great one to talk to.
It just gives an option, because quite often, like when you look at maybe 7, 8, or 10 years back, there was the philosophy around cloud first was almost very rigid in certain customers and certain people's mind. But then the way we have seen the progression of technology, the applications, the world is being SaaSified. So there are people and the companies and the thought process, the CTOs, that they're changing their mindset to be more flexible in terms of finding the right home for the right workload. Right. I think that's a key messaging that we are trying to give here is like, if you want to use it, consume it as a SaaS service, here are the set of products that you can consume as a SaaS service. If you want to consume this service as a cloud native, here are a set of use cases and applications that you can consume very much as cloud native. There are certain applications which should not be touched at all, and they are fine into their monolithic landscape. And we see a lot of example of some of those services, although it's gradually decreasing in terms of the number of services that is not available into a microservices form factor. But a lot of those manufacturing applications and some of those applications with industries which are into let's say manufacturing or some traditional industries like cars and other things, those applications are still kind of getting matured into a microservices landscape, right? But this is just an optionality that the customers are getting, that they can look at find a new lens to look at things. And we as a company, VMware by Broadcom, is offering them those choices into their cloud operating model as well. So that's a key thing that exist there. That's why we are going not only by the use cases that is there, we are trying to look at new use cases that we can come up with. Because as I said, I think we are underselling it. We need to kind of go out and talk a lot about some of these advantages to the customers in a much more outreach way as well.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think it's definitely undersold in terms of that optimized piece, which I'm trying to coin that phrase now. It's going to be the optimized use case. But I think it is undersold because it also, not only does it optimize cost and can improve performance and availability, resiliency, it can also give the customer a cloud exit strategy, which I think is something that's important as well. Is, if you want to go from hyperscaler 1 to hyperscaler 2, very difficult if you've gone, really deep into their native services. Much harder to do than if you're on VMware, where you can use HCX just to move them across reasonably easily. So, in comparison, easily anyway. So definitely a use case that we need to champion more. So let me know. We'll do some webinars.
Yeah. Sure, I think that's a great segue. I think we obviously will not have much time to talk about it, but essentially all of this enables the customers to build hybrid cloud frameworks. A cloud framework which is across any kind of endpoint that they want. I think that's what the key messaging that has been going on for a number of years now, where you have application portability. You don't need to kind of go into obviously there is going to be certain workloads suitable for a certain cloud provider, but then you need to have optionality. And the major risk of when you stick to a given particular architecture choice is when you don't have ways to come out of it. Right, and this is where what we're trying to create is a kind of a super glue on across when you look at the cloud operating model, where we are providing optionality. And even in the case that we talked about, the rebalancing is not just going to be from let's say EC2 to VMC. It can be in Azure landscape, it can be in Google landscape, or between the hyperscalers itself, which is what you talked about. HCX provides that kind of an architecture mobility as well. So I think it's all about the cloud architecture mobility from a workload perspective that the overarching solution kind of provides, and which is where it's a very well-rounded technology architecture that we have built, and we are very super proud of that.
Absolutely. And look, that customer I was referring to earlier is actually going across 2 hyperscalers as well. So for anyone out there that thinks this is just a pipe dream or it's just marketing, we're literally working on a project right now using 2 hyperscalers, for that cloud exit strategy piece, for the DR piece, to also integrate with their native workloads in each of the hyperscalers and provide that hybrid cloud. So, I wouldn't say it's a simple solution, but it's far simpler than if we tried to design that from the ground up on-prem. So it's delivering a lot more value than we ever could in their own data centers.
Cool. So you asked a question on ESA. So maybe we can, okay, let me just quickly cover, just for your audience, in terms of availability. This is for VMware Cloud and AWS. Similar availability is there for Azure. Oracle is kind of by default available wherever they have their service, and similar availability is available for Google. So, they can have a look at that. We just launched Hyderabad a month back. So that's the newest region that we have launched in India. And before that, we launched Melbourne. So these are the 2 regions that we have launched in last few months. And that provides basically our ANZ-based customers and India customers another option of a data center, because we were seeing challenges around them kind of looking at DR to other data center, right? So that those kind of workloads are fulfilled. There were some regulatory requirements from banking, but again, really happy that the 2 regions are now available in APJ. But the global, we have few customers in APJ who use data centers outside of APJ as well, but they are based here. We work with them. So I think in terms of region availability, you can see the roadmap as well. We will be continuously be working on adding more and more regions for our customers. So in terms of availability, if their business is in APJ, they're all well covered. If their business is global, they're also covered there, because a lot of customers build their architecture spanning across multiple regions, multiple availability zones. And if you're looking at creating 4 nines of availability in terms of architecture, it is important that we provide more options for the customers to run their workloads on, right? So it's part of one of the architecture choices that the customers make. The other key part is that each of these regions, we have regulatory certifications that we go through. And VMC in AWS is one of the most highest certified cloud offering that we have at this point of time, right? So any major certification that you see, like ISMAP, ORAP, MTCS, PCI, and all those the compliances around that. So there is a list of compliance certifications that we manage, and we proactively go and refresh it whenever the regulatory authority is required to do it. So that's another great point, is that when you're putting your workload in there, you don't need to have second thoughts around, is it meeting my regulatory requirements or not? Because we do a lot of emphasis on making sure that wherever we have our cloud running, it's compliant to that particular geography's compliance levels, as well as there are certain compliances which are global in nature now, right? So we make sure that we are compliant to those.
Yeah, so customers inherit that security level that you've architected.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great value as well. You've got that base level of compliance already when you adopt one of these solutions.
Yeah. Cool. I think the ESA, this one is we can quickly cover, but people can read the white papers. Essentially, what we're looking at is just, if you look at just the cloud economics around running VMware Cloud in the hyperscalers, typically 34% is the savings that we see when it's a light storage use case, and if it's a heavy storage use case, we see around 46% of savings. This is a published white paper. Josh, maybe you can provide the link when the podcast is released.
We can do that.
And you can go through all the rationale behind the entire mechanism, and it's a very detailed oriented paper which talks about the financial the feasibility of the solution itself.
And having reviewed some of these, I'll just say for the audience, it's very realistic as well. There's obviously some that you could argue, some of the details one way or the other, but overall, I think they're quite accurate in the assessments I've done as well.
Yeah, and again, these are so oftentimes what happens is we can't do cloud economics assessment for each and every customer in the first go itself, right? So some of these tools are available on our website to make sure that the customers can assess and just go through this into the first phase of their thought process around choosing the solution. But obviously we offer, as I'm sure you are offering to your customers as well, that we can do a detailed cloud economics assessment for their respective use case. And some of these numbers then either will go higher or it can come down a bit, right? But there is definitely a value that we see, and that's something that we work with our customers to agree on, the soft cost versus the hard cost, how they calculate, the overall realization of benefit. Do they look at focusing on the man hours, or do they discount that? Some of those discussions are very personal to these accounts, and we are happy to do that. Whoever is interested in kind of doing a detailed study for them, and we have done that a ton of time in the past.
Absolutely. And I couldn't recommend those more either. They're a great idea. We do them as well. So, it's a great idea to do a specific one on your environment, because, look, a lot of customers fall within the same, rough boundaries, but some are way outside the boundaries, and a custom assessment either shows it's really viable for them or it's completely not viable. And that's why it's important to validate some of those assumptions, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and doing this early in the sales cycle, or early in the, I would say, when you're trying to make these choices, helps you either you want to go down in that lane further, or you want to just basically stop and look at other options, right? So it's always advisable to do these kind of financial assessments first. because then you have to look at the feasibility, because if the dollars are not there, you won't be able to make any any kind of a representation to your own CFO if the benefit is not going to be there, right? So I think it's just a more optimized way of even looking at any new technologies, to look at first the financial viability. And that's why we make sure that some of these papers are released publicly, because then the customers can independently go through those reports. And it's not only we are doing this, even our own hyperscaler partners, they also kind of go and look at some of these things and publish their own reference around financial benefits as well to the customers.
Absolutely. And I think this slide we've got here on vSAN ESA highlights some of those benefits as well. So, for those who are interested in a bit more of a deep dive, vSAN has the original storage architecture, or OSA, and the express storage architecture, which is fairly new, called ESA. And basically, ESA has a raft of benefits. So myself and one of my principal architects, James Worth, did a very detailed example architectural decision 3-part series highlighting the advantage of ESA over OSA. And some of those points are actually on this slide. So, it's storing data more efficiently. There's probably 20-25% more efficiency in terms of usable capacity. And the one, of course, that's close to my heart, I've always talked about resiliency in my career. I think that's something that's neglected a lot of the time. And the resiliency of ESA is far superior to OSA. And it means that it can tolerate, a failure with lower impact. It can restore resiliency quicker, and do so with a smaller fault domain. So lots of benefits. And the fact that it's in early availability on VMC already, I think is quite exciting. So customers who are already using VMC, fantastic. You'll be able to get this at some point. And for those considering it, it's a great time to jump in now with ESA.
Yeah, it is. I think you know more on ESA than me, for sure. Thank you for all your deep dive, series that you're doing. But it's a game changer if you look at it, right? This is we released this on November 14th with respect to initial access for VMC. And if you look at this is because VMC is built on the same release train as our core products like vSAN. We are able to use this technology and provide it early available to our customers. And why it is game changing is because again, on VMC, there are 2 hardware platforms available at this point of time. It will be supported just to make sure that our customers know that it is only going to be available on i4i.metal at this point of time. And one of the advantages that we see is in terms of your storage utilization itself, the storage benefit can be anywhere between 14% to up to 40%, depending on the use cases, depending on the compression ratio. Right? As we know, in the storage world, compression ratio depends very much on the workload type. So that's kind of an advantage that we are seeing. We are also seeing in terms of performance for this particular architecture, that with the same set of hardware and the same set of networking infrastructure that you have, you are getting a lot more performant. Your RAID 5, RAID 6 performance is as good as RAID 1 in this case, without compromising anything on the resiliency side as well, right? So in the end, if I look at from an architect perspective, as a pure play storage architect, when I go and talk to the customers and design, I am really happy to see that with the same existing hardware, I'm able to design a more deeper storage dense node. I don't have to go and buy a separate storage service from VMware or NetApp at that point of time. And just with the software update, and this will be available to all our customers very soon. And this is again going to be done by our SRE team, so you will not have to worry about how do I move from OSA to ESA. When you're ready, when we do the checks in the backend, we'll consult with you, and then we'll make the joint decisions with you. And then once that decision is done based on your workload type and everything else, depending on when it's going to be GA, you will be moved into that release train, right? So it's again, how do you going to get it? It's just going to be through the similar mechanism, connecting with your TAM or customer success, and we follow through that particular process. But it is again very game changing for me, at least in the VMC business, but also for the existing VCF customers on vSAN. it's amazing, right? That they're going to get the amount of storage and the performance that they're going to get, which is going to be really, really good for value for the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that deep dive I referred to earlier covers a lot of these points, but the one that's very obvious to me is why the performance is so better is the elimination of the disk groups. So the concept of
Correct.
a disk group is where you have a cache drive and capacity drives, as you know. The cache drive was really a bottleneck there because it's a single cache drive for the disk group. So now with the storage pool concept and the disk groups gone, ESA can really outperform because it can utilize the hardware more efficiently. So to your
Correct.
point, the same hardware, just a new version of vSAN, and you've got better performance, better resiliency, more usable capacity. So yeah, very excited to do a few projects with ESA, both on-prem and obviously in VMC.
Yeah. And one of the things that I talk to all my friends in the technology industry is that we are seeing in the last few years the hardware innovation is surpassing the software innovation. So it's always a catch-up game, right? So if you look at the evolution of hard drives, if you look at the evolution of networking, the software is not able to extract the value from the hardware because the hardware innovation is going at a such more rapid pace. So this is again the ESA. The core idea behind ESA was that the hardware has been is so advanced on the in the storage side, on the networking side, that we have to kind of go and revamp. I mean, we have still retained the core essence of what the OSA architecture is, but as Josh pointed out, the subtle changes in terms of the way we handle the I/O, the compression ratios, the merging, the caching, and the capacity tier, and all of that. Basically, what we are doing is we are effectively utilizing the hardware more. And we are doing the justice to what the hardware capability that has been being offered by the hardware industry itself, right? So I think is going to be a continuous battle between hardware innovation and software innovation, and the programmers have to do a lot of more work to extract the value out of the hardware going forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you very much echoed what Sazala Reddy mentioned when he was on the podcast a little while ago. Sazala is a CTO at VMware, and he was one of the key people responsible for that rewrite of vSAN onto a log structured file system to do exactly what you said, which is take advantage of that fast pace of hardware innovation. So kudos to that team, and I think they've done a great job.
Yeah, Sazala and Sazala was here in Singapore, I think last month, and we were kind of presenting to a bunch of financial accounts in Singapore, which is again some of the focus was this, but primarily focus was on ransomware recovery. So again, what his team and they have done is amazing, and Sazala continues to lead that team, which is great for us in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They've definitely got a superstar there. So I've known Sazala for a few years, and yeah, very smart man.
For sure.
All right. Now, what was the last thing you were going to put up on the screen here? I think there was one more thing you were going to show me.
Yeah, this is just making sure that there are certain benchmarks that we do, but again, these are not numbers that you can just take on face value. Essentially, what you're looking at here is depending on your selection of your RAID type and the number of hosts, how much of the performance, the capacity improvements that you're seeing. And you can see the lowest when you look at is, again, ESA is still 14% higher than OSA with respect to capacity getting extracted from the same number of hosts to the same type. And the highest that you can see is around 46%. So some of these numbers that we obviously try to run, but again, we don't publish these numbers specifically out. So as a benchmarking figure, so don't take these numbers for your own production deployments and such. You're welcome to do a POC to validate some of these numbers based on your workload types. But essentially what you look at, if you have to summarize, the per node capacity effectively increases to around 27 TIB raw, and 16 node cluster, which is kind of a recommended cluster size at this point of time on VMC. The customer can get around 437 TIB on a 16 node cluster. That is amazing, right? You can virtually tackle any kind of deep storage requirement that you had from a workload perspective into just a 16 node cluster, which is why I'm really excited about this, that as an architect, I don't have to worry about trying to plug and play other services to kind of adhere to the storage heavy workload. Obviously, there will be somewhat certain technical requirements that may come in where I have to go and plug in the VMware, the storage file system or NetApp storage file system in there. But I think with this change, without compromising on performance while increasing the performance, I think we'll be able to handle a variety of workloads on a storage dense node perspective itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, yeah, any of the VMware partners and architects can run customers through the different scenarios. And as you said, 14 to 40% difference. And really the difference here is the cluster size and also the data protection type or the RAID type. So it does vary a little bit, but I would say in general, it's definitely sort of 20+% on average. In fact, this table supports that as well. So it's a huge improvement in capacity and performance as well. So yeah, fantastic efficiency improvement there.
Absolutely. Okay, I think that is it from the deck. Anything else you want to discuss?
Well, I think we've nailed it. I think you've covered things off really well, and we've hit pretty much the exact mark we wanted to hit in terms of time as well. So I think this is really good, and I would just encourage everyone listening who's considering a VMware Cloud solution to check out VMC and AWS and the other offerings with the other hyperscalers. And especially look at ESA on-prem as well. If you're going to go down the route of HCI, that's definitely a good way to go. And lots more exciting things coming, which we can talk about maybe in a couple of months' time and get you back on.
A lot more exciting. I'm really excited about the next phase here at VMware Broadcom. I think a lot of people who would like to know where we are going forward, I would ask them to refer to the blog post that Hawk10 has been doing for a number of months now, and that will give you a general direction of where we are going. And I'm really excited about seeing the vision is very, very profound. There is a sense of simplification, as you can see the recent announcement that we have done with respect to our licensing changes, which is again going to be really impactful for our enterprise customers. So again, looking forward to kind of going forward and working with our customers in both VCF as well as on the VMware Cloud product suite as well. So Josh, thank you for your time. It's been 1 hour 20 plus minutes. It just feels like 5 minutes because we know each other for a longer time.
Absolutely. It's been a great catch up. And when I'm in Singapore next, we can definitely have some dinner and some drinks and catch up some more. But it's been a pleasure, mate. And can't wait to catch up in person.
Yeah, thank you. And congratulations on your new journey as an entrepreneur. And really wish you guys well. Yeah, thank you.
Much appreciated, Samir. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.